Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, today I want to continue on this series on how to play Lamentations of the Flame Princess and other OSR retro clone type games. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said you've really been talking about or giving examples from a lot of games in the last couple of videos. And it's true. You know, I could have done just a series on Lamentations. I kind of vacillated back and forth. How did I want to do this? But I really wanted to do it on what would OSR retro clones look like or feel like, for you, period, because that's the kind of questions I was getting or discussions I was involved in. So I wanted to give it more of a shotgun approach. Today is going to be a lot closer to just Lamentations of the Flame Princess, but it applies to about everything. But I'm going to talk about hit points, hit dice, and a little bit about weapons, weapon damage. So hit points are this abstract game mechanic, and not everybody likes them. I have friends that absolutely hate them. So you love it or hate it. This is what you're going to encounter in these games. So just kind of giving you a flat-out warning. This is how they work in terms of damage. However, it's all the narration. It really is. The way they feel can be, dramatically affected by how you narrate it and how you view it. So I am going to give you a little bit of a history lesson and then jump into, I'm going to talk about pretty much like old D&D, like something like what Swords and Wizardry would do, the old white box version, or delving deeper, and then talk about Lamentations of the Flame Princess and really not touch on too much other games, but they all pretty much handle it the same. The original idea, and this made a lot, I didn't learn this until later, but this made a lot of sense to me when I finally, found this out years later. The original hit die was a D6, and everybody got a D6 hit die to start out with, and that was you'd roll and find how many hit points you had, whether you were a wizard or a fighter or a cleric or a thief. That's what you had. A normal person also had a D6 hit die. As you went up in level, because it is a level-based game, what used to happen in the old version of the game was that maybe a fighter would start out with at 1 + 2 hit dice. He would start out with rolling a d6 but adding 2 hit points. A magic user might just start out at 1, and then the next level, the fighter might be 2 hit dice, but the magic user would just be 1 + 1. He would keep that that die roll, that d6 die roll, and add a hit point to it. And I'll get back to that, keeping that die roll. So the classes were differentiated from each other that way in terms of how many hit points they had by how many hit dice they got to roll. You didn't get one every single level. So, anyway, going back to this example of why they made sense back then, and why it still kind of makes sense to me, is, okay, D6 is a hit die. All weapons did D6 damage. Didn't matter if it was a dagger, a longsword, whatever. If you got hit with a weapon, it did that much damage. On average, how many hit dice you had was how many hits it took to kill you. Now, they could have just used points and said, okay, well, every level you get another hit point. But then it would be a sure thing. If you got hit by something, you would die automatically. Here it was a bit random. So that's how it used to work. Back when there was no variable weapon damage and there were no different type of hit dice. You had this many hit points, and the weapon did this much damage. Good chance it's going to kill you. Anyhow, what used to happen, and I said I was going to get back to this, in the very old versions of the game, you would re-roll things every level. So people that are used to later versions of the game, literally Lamentations of the Flame Princess, are used to okay, well, if at first level you roll a 5, that's great, that's higher than average. And say second level you roll a 6, now you've got 11 hit points. At third level maybe you're going to roll another die, right? Well, here's what used to happen: is you'd re-roll them. Say you had 3 hit dice now, you were supposed to re-roll all of them. You're supposed to roll 3 dice and see what came up. And if it was higher than the hit points you used to have, you got to keep them. Otherwise, you kept the old hit points you had. So over time, there was this kind of regression towards the mean. There weren't these characters with a massive amounts of hit points compared to these other characters that didn't have very many at all. So you may like that or hate that. That's just what used to happen. And the Constitution modifier used to apply, or it still applies to that. So if you have a character with a Constitution modifier, every time you roll hit dice, or new hit points every level, you get to add or subtract that Constitution modifier from it. In Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and most of the games that use Basic as a framework, the fighters get D8 hit dice every level. Clerics get D6, thieves get D6. Magic users, I mentioned before, they use D4 hit dice. However, the first level, they get to use a D6 in Lamentations of the Flame Princess. That's the only game that does that as far as I know, which I think is kind of neat. And normal men get D6 hit points every level. Now, originally, like I said, all weapons did D6 damage. However, Basic, I think it was BX actually. I don't even think it was Home's Basic. It was BX Basic, which Lamentations is based on, introduced a concept. It was an optional rule when I got the set in 1981. Everything did D6, but you could use this optional rule that there was variable weapon damage. And there were small weapons that did D4. There was medium weapons that did D6, and then there were large weapons that did D8. Lamentations of the Flame Princess introduced, and it's not the first game to have done it, introduced the idea of great weapons, these big two-handed weapons that did D10, but they're incredibly encumbering. And, you know, I get to the encumbrance system in Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which I've done videos on. It's great to have that weapon, but it's going to slow you down. You're not going to be able to carry a lot more stuff. So that's how weapons work in Lamentations of the Flame Princess in terms of damage. There is this optional rule out there on the net, which I really like. I have never used it, but I really dig it. I should use it sometime, where the weapons don't do different amounts of damage. It's what class you are. If you are a wizard, you're probably not very good with weapons, so you're going to do D4. It doesn't matter if you can use a longsword. If you're a fighter, you're going to do D8 damage, even if you're using a dagger. You just know how to kill people. And then, you know, clerics and thieves do D6. So that's kind of a neat little shtick you can use with weapons. So I was talking about before. You know, it's the narration that matters. And by the way, I did forget to mention that your strength modifier would affect how much damage you do in most of these games, except for Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I usually house rule that it does, but James wanted you to be able to just, you know, be able to score just 1 hit point of damage. So, you know, just throwing that out there. You know, it's a canon rule, but you don't necessarily have to use it. It's all in how you narrate. I made a video about narrating, you know, damage in combat in old school games a while ago, but I wanted to kind of cover it here again. I will probably link that to this video if you want to watch it. It's how you view what hit points are that really influences, you know, what the countdown looks like. You know, the idea that you're constantly getting wounded and nothing's happening to you mechanically, a lot of people don't like, and so they prefer games where, as you start to take damage to your health or whatever you're going to call it, you start to incur mechanical damages. You know, what I did as a kid was we all did the same thing. We all just kind of used this hit point countdown, and okay, we took 5 points of damage. Okay, you still got 20 more. Keep fighting. Nobody really, you know, you might even say, oh, you look hurt, but nothing happened, and because it was a countdown. You know, we were used to at that point, you know, I don't know, other things where, you know, we were just, you know, counting things down mathematically. I think at that point, the video games where you had less lives, you know, were out. You know, Space Invaders. God knows what else. You only got 1 more life left, dude. Life left. So here's what happens, or what you can use. What I started to do is I started to envision them more as hit points representing your luck, your defensive combat prowess, your mojo, your combat skill. And the idea that, okay, when you take 5 hit points of damage now, when you're somebody that has, like, say, you've got these 3 hit dice, and you take a hit die worth of damage at that point, you know, you haven't really been hurt significantly. You've been scratched. You're the guy that should have killed you. That, you know, the person was going to land a really good blow, but you're so good, you get out of the way, and you just get a scratch. You just get, you know, you roll with a punch if you get whacked with something, however you want to narrate it. So at that point, you're not taking any mechanical penalties, but it's because you're so good that, you know, you were able to, some of your combat mojo has been erased for the time being, but you're doing okay, you know. It's the last couple hit points, 1 or 2 hit points that really kill you. So, you know, even James Raggi even says in his DM's guide, or, you know, Game Master's guide, that's kind of how it should work, and it just represents your combat skill, kind of, you know, clocking, you know, ticking down as you're taking more and more bumps till you finally, like, you know, your mojo is kind of weakened. Whereas something like a big giant monster, it has a lot of hit points because it's big and giant. You are actually hurting it at that point. So the narration really helps. In terms of, like, you know, death, die, and healing, I want to go over this really, really fast and not make this a long video. Most of the games handle it as at 0 hit points you are dead. Some of them let you go into negative hit points. Lamentations of the Flame Princess, as I mentioned before, -4 hit points is dead. When you get hit to -3 hit points, you are irrevocably dying. There's nothing anybody's going to be able to do to save you. But you are able to get down to, like, -1 and, you know, 0, -1, -2, and be pretty much completely incapacitated. But, you know, you still have a shot. As far as healing goes, the way Lamentations handle it is if you have taken less than half of your hit points, you get to heal a hit point every night with a full night's rest, or D3 hit points per day. If you've taken more than half your hit points and damage, then you only hit 1 hit point per day, which is, I understand completely. This is contradictory to what he just said. You're free to mess with that as you will. I mean, I do like the variant where you just happen to heal your level in hit points per day, although there's another one that's really great out there, which, you know, it's not just for Lamentations, for all these games, where you heal your class hit die per day. So if you're a fighter, maybe you'll heal D8 hit points every single day. You know, like, you know, a full day of rest. that sort of thing, and figure out what you want to do as far as a night's rest. Because in many of these cases, if you're envisioning it like I do, you're healing back your kind of your mojo. You know, you got bruised a little bit. You maybe you mess with your luck a little bit, however you want to narrate it. But now you're starting to heal that back. You know, and I tell you what, healing and magical healing, the spells, all that kind of stuff, that's where the hit point logic breaks down. It does. I mean, you can't narrate that as skill and mojo as effectively anymore. I understand that. At that point, I know that I'm kind of hedging my bets, and we all are. You know, those of us that still defend that system. I'm okay with it. You may not be. You know, but it's just that's what you're going to encounter. That's what you're going to have to make the mental hurdle, you know, over. Are you going to be able to do that and live with that or not? So that's a question you're going to have to answer for yourself. So that's hit points, hit dice, and weapons.